Very dark. I found it like one of my hair is black or brown.
Well, I see it's light. It's definitely shaded.
Alright guys, ready for chapter 6? Are you ready?
It's like those
Beats from the air? Ready? Alright, okay. Okay, good. Yep. Alright, so we're gonna start with when we were together yesterday and we finished up chapter 5, which was Beast from the Water. The last thing that happened in that chapter on page page 94. Okay, so if you can just travel back to page 94 with me real quick. We were looking at a bit of irony because the last thing that we highlighted on page 94 was that Ralph was desperately praying for a sign to come down from the world of grown-ups. Okay, so we had 2 quotes, I believe, on page 94. Did we get those?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, so we're all drifting and things are going rotten, and at home there was always a grown-up. Please, sir, and please, miss, and then you got an answer, how I wish. And we said this was irony because back in chapter 1, this was the same boy who was doing cartwheels in the sand and was no grown-ups and so excited. And now he's praying for a grown-up. So if we look at chapter 6, Beast from the Air, the very first thing that happens is something does arrive from the world of grown-ups. So what do you have for number 1? Okay, Lucy, go ahead.
I said it was a man that probably came from a plane in the air, and he had a parachute, and the plane probably like exploded, and he was the only survivor maybe
Yep.
that was found on the island, and
So-
he
go ahead.
descended towards the mountain.
So all of those things that you just said came from inferences based on the text, correct? Because the text was giving you little details about what was going on above the island, although there were no boys awake. Bless you. Okay, everybody was sleeping, so nobody saw the stuff that you get to see that Golding describes. Okay, so I want everybody to start with me on page 95. On 95, and then do you see the second paragraph that starts with a sliver of moon rose over the horizon? Do you see where I am? Okay, so read with me, get your highlighter ready. It says, a sliver of moon rose over the horizon, hardly large enough to make a path of light, even when it sat right down on the water. Highlight here. But there were other lights in the sky that moved fast, winked, and went out, though not even a faint popping came down from the battle fought at 10 miles height. But a sign came down from the world of grown-ups, though at the time there was no child awake to read it. There was a sudden, bright explosion and a corkscrew trail across the sky. Then darkness again and stars. There was a speck above the island, a figure dropping swiftly beneath a parachute, a figure that hung with dangling limbs. And you're going to stop your highlight there. That gave you a ton of information, and a lot of it Lucy just picked up on, right? So she said that there were planes, okay? So those lights that are blinking and flying across the sky are most likely aircraft, military planes. And the boys don't hear anything, A, because they're sleeping, but B, because the battle that's being fought, Golding tells us, is 10 miles high. So it's really far up in the sky. So there's gunfire going on, but it's just not coming down to the island because they're so high up. But if you were awake, you would see an explosion in the sky. You would see something sort of spiral, which we probably infer is the plane hitting the water and crashing. And then all of a sudden there's visible this tiny little speck, and as it comes closer to the island, there can clearly be seen a parachute above the tiny little speck. And the last thing we highlighted was a figure with dangling limbs. So what do we infer as readers, Vivian? Dead or unconscious from the explosion. So there's some person under this parachute coming toward the island, okay? So now, Keep reading with me, but don't highlight, just read with me where we left off. It says the changing winds of various altitudes took the figure where they would. Okay, so he's not maneuvering the parachute, it's just blowing in the breeze. It says then, 3 miles up, the wind steadied and bore it in a descending curve around the sky and swept it in a great slant across the reef and the lagoon toward the mountain. The figure fell, crumpled among the blue flowers of the mountainside, and now there was a gentle breeze at this height too, and the parachute flopped and banged and pulled. So the figure, with feet that dragged behind it, slid up the mountain, yard by yard, puff by puff. The breeze hauled the figure through the blue flowers, over the boulders and redstones, till it lay huddled among the shattered rocks of the mountaintop. Here, the breeze was fitful and allowed the strings of the parachute to tangle and festoon meaning get stuck, okay? And it says, the figure sat, its helmeted head between its knees, held by a complication of lines. And we're going to start our highlight right here again. So I want you to pick up right where I left off. When the breeze blew, the lines which strained taut, and some accident of this pull lifted the head and chest upright, so that the figure seemed to peer across the brow of the mountain. Then each time the wind dropped, the lines would slacken, and the figure bowed forward again, sinking its head between its knees. So as the stars moved across the sky, the figure sat on the mountaintop and bowed and sank and bowed. Do you understand what's happening here? Do you understand what has happened to this figure? Yes, you understand? Mostly? Okay, so he ends up in a pile of rocks, and he's sitting in like a ape-like position, kind of sitting with his head between his knees, and the parachute is attached obviously to his midsection with the strings coming off, and they're all tangled in the rocks and the bramble, but there's enough of the parachute left that it can pick up some breeze. So when the wind blows, it will pull some of that fabric open, and it pulls the lines as the breeze blows. So when he's sitting like this and the breeze gets fitful enough, it's gonna pull his whole body up so it looks like he's sitting up. And then when the wind dies away, the lines will slacken and then he falls forward again. So as the breeze is blowing, he just keeps sitting up and falling forward, and sitting up and falling like a puppet. Think of a puppet on strings, okay? Now why don't Sam and Eric, who are the two boys on the top of the mountain, why don't they see any of this, right? They were on duty, right? They didn't see a big giant explosion in the sky, and why not, Luke?
It says they were asleep.
And they weren't supposed to be.
Yeah, but
Yeah, they were supposed to be taking turns, right? One boy was supposed to be sleeping, and the other boy was supposed to be on a lookout. And in fact, this night they both went to sleep. So not even Sam and Eric know what has happened. All the other boys are sleeping down on the beach. Okay, so the sign that comes down from the world of grown-ups is a dead pilot. We're going to assume that he's deceased, okay, attached to a parachute, and he ends up on the mountain near the fire and is stuck on the rocks. Okay, so his parachute is all tangled. So when these two boys wake up and they start trying to build the fire up again, they are very close to where this body has landed, and they see something, right? So what did you write for this, for number 2? What do they see? What do they think they see? What do we know they see? That's kind of how I look at it. Abby?
Well, they think they saw the beast.
They think it's the beast, but we know they probably just saw sort of maybe like a shadow or something. Yeah, okay? So here we go for this one. And I just put in here, if you want to take what we have, that they think they see the beast, but in actuality, because a lot of you just wrote beast, but in actuality, when the wind blows, what they see is probably just like a shadowy figure sit up among the rocks, because they don't know what they're looking at. Okay, so let's look at that part real quick. let's jump to page 98. On page 98, I'm gonna be from the top down to like maybe the second larger paragraph that says Sam looked at Eric irritably. Do you see where I am? Yep, okay, so on 98, let's highlight that paragraph. It says Sam looked at Eric irritably and the intensity of Eric's gaze made the direction in which he looked terrible, for Sam had his back to it. He scrambled around the fire, squatted by Eric and looked to see. They became motionless, gripped each other's arms, 4 unwinking eyes aimed and 2 mouths open. And that's describing the 2 boys. Eric's on this side, Sam is on that side. Eric's looking off in the distance and he sees something and he's startled and he's like, Sam. Sam's like, what? And he's like looking and his eyes are wide and Sam realizes that whatever's behind him, he has his back towards it. So he scrambles around the fire and the 2 boys are hugging each other, scared to death, and they're looking in the distance. And just when they're staring in the right spot, the wind blows. And so it says, far beneath them, the trees of the forest sighed and then roared. The hair on their foreheads fluttered and flames blew out sideways from the fire. And it says 15 yards away from them came the plopping noise of fabric blown open. So we know that that sound is what? It's the parachute, right, blowing open. But they don't know what it is. They're just looking in the distance and they hear a weird noise and then all of a sudden, just imagine them seeing like something kind of sit up in the darkness. And of course they're terrified. So immediately they run down to the beach, right? And they're gonna tell everybody what has happened. So how do they explain to the group their experience? What do they say? Eric?
While they sit, they have to solve these things and shoot them.
Okay, so can you give me some actual text?
I don't have that.
You don't? Where's page 100? Do you see the giant section in the middle of 100 with all the M dashes? Lots of description. So your answer for number 3 should have plenty of text. Everybody go to page 100 and look at what they say. What kinds of things do they sort of elaborate on? Not necessarily the whole truth. Tell me one thing, Eric.
Claws.
Okay, so they claim that the beast had claws. Jackie?
Said it was furry, there was something moving behind its head, and then it has an M dash.
They claim it was furry and that it had giant wings. Caitlin? Yes, it followed me. That's so not true. Vivian?
It had like claws.
Yeah, teeth, eyes. I saw it slinking behind the trees. It nearly touched me. Okay, so we're gonna take that whole highlight from starting at the top where it says it was furry, all the way down to nearly touched me. Highlight that whole chunk. So they're embellishing, right? Trying to get the boys really scared, because that's not what happened. They did not see all those things. Okay, so it was furry, it had something moving behind its head, wings, the beast moved, it kind of sat up. That part's right. That's truthful, correct? It kind of sat up, that's right. But then the rest, there were eyes, teeth, claws, right? It followed us, we bashed into things, it nearly touched me. So obviously the boys listening to this nonsense are terrified. And I know that because it says the circle of boys shrank away in horror. So now, once they get this information, this was not one of your questions, but how do both Jack and Ralph react to this news? Take a skim over the bottom of 100 and 101 and tell me something about the first sort of reactions of Jack and Ralph to this news. You have to look in your book for this, Kyle.
I know it's right here.
Okay, so you're gonna raise your hand and tell me something?
I can.
Sure.
I'm carrying on it, but sure.
Okay. Plans can change. They can. So how is Jack reacting and how is Ralph reacting?
Oh, well, Jack is like, wait, who says this will be a real hunt?
That's Jack.
Okay, well, he sounds excited.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
He wants to leave right away and go hunt the beast. Yes. How about Ralph? What kinds of things are, what kind of things is he saying, Josh? Oh, that's when he's looking at Eric. Eric has like a scratch on his face that's bleeding, and he's like, how did that happen? And Eric's like, oh my gosh, am I bleeding? And then all the boys assume that it's the beast.
What they said?
No, I don't recall that in the text. I
No,
recall
I'm
that.
making it up.
Yeah, you don't do that.
Don't make up sense.
Yeah, don't make
I
up.
wasn't saying with my voice.
Okay, so of course they're frightened because they see his injury. Oh my goodness. Okay, what else about Ralph? You have something for Ralph? Yeah.
Well, he's like, they don't like know because
Yeah, so he says on page 101, who's going to look after the little ones? And, Jack's like, nobody has so far. And he's like, well, we need to. We need to, somebody's got to stay here. We can't all leave to go look for this beast, okay? And he's being practical and sensible. So on page 101, where Jack just wants to leave right now and go hunt this thing down, Ralph's trying to be a little bit smarter and he's a little more hesitant. And I want you to look at this quote right here on 101. It's below the halfway point, and you're looking for a little paragraph that starts with, and another thing. Evan, find that paragraph, and another thing. And you're gonna highlight that whole paragraph. He says, and another thing, you can't have an ordinary hunt because the beast doesn't leave tracks. If you did, or if it did, you'd have seen them. For all we know, the beast may swing through the trees, like what's its name? So we've got to think. So he's, again, trying to be logical. You can stop there. Bottom of the page, Piggy says, I mean, how about us? Suppose the beast comes when you're all away. I can't see proper, and if I get scared. And Jack breaks in and he says, you're always scared. And we're going to highlight, bottom of the page, last 3 lines. I've got the conch. Conch, conch, shouted Jack. We don't need the conch anymore. Flip the page. We know who ought to say things. What good did Simon do speaking, or Bill, or Walter? It's time some people knew they've got to keep quiet and leave deciding things to the rest of us. And I'm going to skip ahead to number 6 because this is the quote, and you had to comment on this. What is he really saying here? Conch, conch, we don't need the conch anymore. What is he saying?
The rules.
Yeah, what are you saying? Well, what they have, democracy is when you have a core of people, right, who all give their opinion and you sort of vote on things that get decided. Yeah, so I'm not sure if Jack, okay, so if Jack were to be in charge, he seems the type of boy that would want to just make decisions and not listen to anybody else and not take anybody else's opinion. So Josh is saying dictatorship. That would be a form of government that perhaps, right? And then what's the other one?
Anarchy.
So the society would be that one. So anarchy is when there are no laws, no rules. And to me, Jack seems like he just doesn't care about the rules. Okay, so take what you need there. Okay. So an anarchy would be no rules at all, and a dictatorship would be one person in charge, not listening to anybody else. Okay? So when he says conch, we don't need the conch anymore, what he's really saying is rules, we don't need the rules anymore. We're going to go back because we need to make sure we get 4. Alright, so at the bottom of 102, so he says to Jack, think, is there anywhere on the island you haven't been? And then this is going to be the first answer for number 4. Where do the boys decide that they're going to go look?
They decide to go to the trail with rocks piled up that makes sort of like a bridge.
Yeah, to go all the way to the end of the island. If you look at your little map, there's like a little rocky bridge and it goes out into the water and there's sort of like a little detached portion. And that's where they're going to go look. So all the rocks are sort of piled up and you have to climb up into this sort of like fortress or like fort, okay? So on 102 at the bottom, can you highlight the last 2 lines, please? There's only, but of course you remember the tail end part where the rocks are all piled up. I've been near there. The rocks make sort of a sort of bridge. There's only one way up. You can stop there. And they decide they're going to go. Okay, and a bunch of the boys decide to follow Ralph and Jack. Simon's there, I think Roger's there, I think Maurice is there. Piggy stays back, and they start walking, okay? And Simon can't believe this. Like, he just does not believe there's such a thing as the beast. And we know this because on page 103, right here, there's a paragraph below the halfway point that says, Simon, you're gonna highlight, Simon, walking in front of Ralph, felt a flicker of incredulity. A beast with claws that scratched, that sat on a mountaintop, that left no tracks and yet was somehow fast enough to catch Sam and Eric. However Simon thought of the beast, there rose before his inward sight the picture of a human. So every time he thinks of the beast, he thinks of a person. And that's a direct correlation or link to what we had in chapter 4, where he said, maybe there is a beast, maybe it's only us. 104 and 105, they're walking, and they finally get there, and then there's like a little bit of disagreement as to who's gonna go first. Ralph steps in and says, I'm chief, I'm gonna go, nobody argue with me, and he goes ahead first. Jack, as we can predict, doesn't like to be left out, so he also secretly joins Ralph, okay? And the two boys get up into this sort of place first. And on 106, how do they each react to this place? 106 gives you the answer for both. And I think you get Jack's reaction first. Lucy, go ahead.
I think Jack feels like uneasy because his face gets red and embarrassed.
I think you're thinking of 102, where he interrupts and Ralph goes, you haven't got the conch, sit down. And it says Jack's face went so white that the freckles showed his clear brown flecks. He licked his lips and remained standing. I think that's the text you're thinking of. So that's before they
Middle
leave.
of 106.
Yeah, on 106, there's something different. Okay, Jackie?
Jack was there and was excited because he thought it would be a good thing for a
He wanted to stay, yes. So right here on 106, this is where my finger is, do you see it says, Jack was excited, and he goes, what a place for a fort. So highlight that, he's excited. He thinks this would be like a cool, hideout, whatever. And right away, Ralph's like, there's no shelter here, there's no food, there's no water. He's sort of disagreeing. And there's something that tells me about Ralph, and I'm looking for a particular line on 106 that tells you how he feels.
Ralph said that it's a rotten place.
Yes. So do you see where you highlighted what a place for a fort? Count down with me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines down, and do you see, not me, this is a rotten place. Highlight. He has a bad feeling about the place the moment he steps foot in there. He just doesn't feel like it's a good place, and he wants to leave. Okay, so obviously the beast doesn't live there. They didn't find anything. They just found a cool place with lots of rocks, which they do what with? They start rolling them, right? So look at 106 at the bottom. Jack sees like this sort of like teetery rock, and he's like, oh, you know what? If an enemy comes this way, you could shove a palm trunk under that, and it would go toppling. And it's like, what is he talking about? If an enemy. So he's like playing, I guess. And so the boys are heaving, right, and rolling rocks hundreds of feet down into the water. 107, okay, Ralph's feeling antsy. He's looking at the mountain. There's no signal showing. He's like, we gotta go back and climb the mountain. That's where they saw the beast. And Jack says, well, the beast won't be there. And he says, but what else can we do? And so again, he's like trying to get the boys to listen to him, and they're not. So on 107, down here at the bottom, do you see this paragraph right here? Towards the bottom, that starts with, but Jack was not there. You see where I am? Down here? Highlight. But Jack was not there. A knot of boys making a great noise that he had not noticed were heaving and pushing at a rock. As he turned, the base cracked and the whole mass toppled into the sea, so that a thunderous plume of spray leapt halfway up the cliff. So they're rolling rocks, and he's getting really angry. And he's like, stop it! stop it! He's yelling at them, and he just starts yelling smoke, because I think he's so desperate to get them to leave that he doesn't even know what else to say. So he's just yelling, smoke, smoke. And he says on 108, fourth line down, we want smoke, and you go wasting your time, you roll rocks. And now Roger steps in and he says, we've got plenty of time. And Ralph shook his head, we'll go to the mountain. And a clamor broke out. Some of the boys wanted to go back to the beach. Some wanted to roll more rocks. The sun was bright, and the fear and danger had faded. And he says, Jack, the beast might be there. You can lead again. So Ralph's so desperate to get them moving that he even offers Jack the chance to lead. He's like, you can take lead, go ahead. And they're not listening to him. And Ralph's like, guys, there's no food here, there's no shelter, there's no fresh water, and they're not listening. This would be an awesome fort, we could roll rocks, and we could do this and that, and they're totally disregarding him. And at the bottom of 108, for some reason, he decides to punch a rock, which just, makes his knuckles bare. And it says, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines up from the bottom of 108, Ralph struck the skin off his knuckles. They did not seem to hurt. And you're gonna highlight, I'm chief. We've got to make certain. Can't you see the mountain? There's no signal now. There may be a ship out there. Are you all off your rockers? And your last question is, at the end of chapter 6, who is chief? How do you know? Who is the leader? What do you think? And how do you know? What would you use for support? The same hands. Same hands. Taylor.
I said Jack is the leader because Ralph doesn't have any control over the kids.
It's one good answer is that he seems to be losing control over getting them to do anything. What else?
They didn't really listen to him at all.
Yeah, he's like, we're gonna leave now, and nobody's moving. Josh. They all were in agreement about what they wanted to do. Yeah, and do you guys know what this word mutinously means?
No.
Do you know what a mutiny is?
Money.
It's usually associated with like pirates. So if the crew is mutinous, they want to overthrow who?
The chief.
The captain, right. So it says, highlight those last 2 lines. It says, mutinously, the boys fell silent. Okay? That tells me that the boys want to go against him. And Ralph. And the only reason why the boys start walking is why? Look at the last line. Jack led the way down the rock and across the bridge. So for those of you that argued Ralph, you could say, yes, he's the leader because technically he was voted, but really it seems like Jack might be more of a leader right now because the only reason the boys leave is because Jack moves. And they're like taking their cues from what he's doing. That's probably not good. That's probably not good. Okay, so now, tonight for homework you have shadows and tall trees. And the boys are going to go climb the mountain. Okay, hold on, listen. Yep, they're gonna go climb the mountain, but there's a problem because when they finally get there, it's going to be dark. Okay, so read tonight to see what happens.
Can we go and go?
Yes.